Welcome to the SharpRank Pro interview series. Each week we will highlight a Sharp listed on our site and cover topics at the intersection of sports and gambling.
All right, we are live. We are back again, joined by Jeremy Conn from 105.7 The Fan. If you are a Baltimore native, you certainly know who this man is. So, Jeremy, welcome in. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, appreciate the invite, man. Looking forward to it.
Cool. So why don't we kind of get started here? Why don't you give us what we call a tall building elevator story of how you got to where you are and doing what you're doing?
I lost a lot of money getting to where I'm at, but eventually you figure it out. So I'd say I started over 20 years ago. Before I got into radio, I was delivering pizzas, and a friend of a friend was like, "Hey, I'm putting some money on games this weekend," and started to learn a little bit about it and figure out what exactly it comes to as far as gambling. And of course, as a young gambler, I'm betting every favorite, every over. Love to root for the points being scored, just like everyone else out there. And that kind of snowballed, and I have an addictive personality when it comes to stuff, and it was something that I really enjoyed. And the ebbs and flows, man, the highs are extremely high, the lows are really low when you're at that point, and just figuring out where you want to be and what type of sports bettor you want. So I started reading more books on it, dove into it, was reading a ton about poker as well, where I think a lot of the philosophy can be kind of the same as far as how you keep your mind right, because the losses are going to come, and just staying focused on what what the grand prize is. And the same thing as far as poker, when if you're playing stacks, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Unless you have the hand you want, or you feel like you have an edge in said particular hand to bluff, you're not going to go all in on just random stuff and just try to get aggressive. And the same approach has to be said as far as gambling and, looking at, Monday night bailouts or Sunday night bailouts and just going crazy for a game you don't like and people chase all the time. So it was a lot of that. But as I slowly started to figure out who I wanted to be and how I wanted to approach slates, it led me into DFS, which has been extremely successful for me over the past year. And so I do a lot of that. And as far as like my approach, it's always been a contrarian approach. And I know that word gets thrown around a lot. It's not just as simple as say, hey, all the money's going to one side and I'll go the other way. I mean, there are some similarities to that approach at looking at things, but like you bet an under, you're not losing it until you've lost it. That's and a lot of people don't want to go into a game with that mindset. You want to root for points. It's very easy to look at a game and see a favorite and go, well, that team's going to win. Yeah, but why is the point spread what it is? Whether it's 3.5, or if we're going to talk money lines and being minus 170, where are the value on the dogs? And so I always try to look at it from a contrarian point of view, especially when I see all the money coming in on one side saying, well, why is the point spread this? Because we've all looked at, a slate of games and said, man, that line stinks to high hell. And it's like, why is the spread that? And why is everyone betting on one side of it? So, that's kind of where I kind of got into it. And it was funny. I started, as I said, delivering pizzas, and I fell in love with it, man. And I love talking about it. The more and more I've learned, I love teaching people what my methods are and the things that I do, because it could be vastly different than a lot of people's approaches, whether it's having a system, whether it's a guy that just kind of has that feel for it. And you look at things, following the money, X's and O's. I mean, there's so many different ways to look at betting games, but for me, I always look at it and I follow the money.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it. And I think we hear it a lot when we talk to folks like this is you can look at a slate of games and just immediately go, something's wrong here with one or two games, and kind of dig into it a little bit. And the one that sticks out for me was that Cleveland Ravens, like the game of the year, the Monday night football game, going into it and looking at that line and the Ravens getting points in that game, and then you saw it like come down to even like by the time kick rolled around. So cool.
And even then that game could have went either way too, right? Like it very easily could have.
Yep. And that oh man, that was a fun one with the safety at the end of the game. So all right, so you're a fairly open book between the radio presence, the content, the social media. Is there anything about you as a person people might be surprised to know? Anything?
Well, Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot that I talk about, man. When the radio station moved me to nights, and now I'm on the Big Bad Morning Show, so I've already been moved twice in a calendar year. Um, I opened up when the coronavirus hit and started talking about my personal life and mental illness, and I mentioned when I was 16 about trying to commit suicide, and I told funny stories, embarrassing stories, and just tried to be, as you said, an open book. And I'm one of those guys that, like, if you don't like me, normally that's going to be a you problem, because I'm going to do everything to go out of my way to make that happen. But the fact is, like, I was a pretty good athlete, and I still play sports, but my body's failing on me. And I talk about it and people look at me. It's still one of my favorite things. Even as a high schooler, I didn't look like I could play anything. So when I played basketball and I was 140 pounds wet and wearing boots out there, I could take anybody off the dribble. And I could really handle the ball, and I had to give up basketball because of my back about 2 years ago. Now I could still play, but I'm just in a lot of pain afterwards. So I still play flag football competitively. I play kickball. I try to stay as active as I can. But truth be told, and anybody that listens to me in Baltimore knows, it's like, oh, he's whining about his back or his neck again. I'm just falling apart, man. I'm a shell of myself. And I'm tired of telling my kids stories about how good I used to be. But basketball was a huge part of my life, and it's always been my first love.
I think that's the point when you realize you're an adult, is when you start to tell stories about the days of yesteryear, and then whether it's a back or a knee or something, and it just kind of hits in. Because similarly, I was a big athlete in high school, and I play squash pretty competitively now, but like, I want to be able to walk when I'm older. And so, like, my wife's like, just bring down the intensity level. But you're very similar to me, and I think, in the respect that, like, if I'm playing a game, I'm playing it to win, and I don't get as much enjoyment out of it just to play a game and, like, just go out and have some fun. And I don't know if you have that same mentality, but I really struggle. Like, oh, it's just supposed to be fun. Like, yeah, they're keeping score.
So the funny thing with me, and so, like, the way I got in the radio is a roundabout way. I walked onto Towson's basketball team in 1997. Never played in a game, was practicing with them. I got in a car accident, dropped 2 classes. Lo and behold, a few weeks later, I find out from the AD that I have 9 credits and you need 12 credits to play a collegiate sport. So I quit school like that. Like, I mean, all my dreams and everything, once I heard about basketball, I was done. And I started playing in all these pickup leagues, and I got back and played a little JUCO. I hated that. It was a lot different than what I expected. And then I'm going, all right, I've got 2 kids now, and here I am trying to live out this college dream of playing, basketball. I just said I had to give it up and focus on something. Shoot an email to a radio station, and far be it for me, like, I never expected to get a response. So yeah, come in for an interview. End up getting the job as an intern, work for free for a year, and just work my way up. No background, no history in this. Just a little bit of the gift of gab, if you will. I'm a social butterfly. I'll talk to anyone. And I don't have, like, when I was in college, I majored in math and theater. I don't have that fear of necessarily being in front of people. It doesn't bother me. I actually enjoy it. So I think that's kind of placated into some of the success in radio. But, as far as, like, sports and what you're talking about, I tell people all the time, like, I'm addicted to competition.
Yeah.
I'm an idiot. And that's why my body's falling apart on me, because like, for example, I had all my wisdom teeth cut out, and 14 hours later, I had gauze shoved in my mouth, bleeding from my mouth. And I played 2 football games. I've thrown out my back, and my wife caught me walking up and down the steps, trying to see if I could run in place so I can go out and play football. And it's just like, I've consistently done that. And if I commit to a team, I have a hard time, like, giving it up for something else. And the sad part is, like, I really, really enjoy it. So getting out and competing, I mean, my favorite thing to hear now is who's covering the fat old white guy, because he's killing us. And I am taking out that third arm, patting myself on the back, but I can still play. But it's funny hearing some of the old stories of guys I used to play against.
Oh man, that's really funny. All right, let's switch gears. Let's talk about what people want to talk about. Let's talk sports betting. When you are looking at a game, and we talked about seeing the slate, is there anything in particular it doesn't necessarily need to be a line, but an outsized line, but is there anything you're looking for when you're picking a game, certain matchups, or how do you go about picking something?
So I talked to somebody about this, like, a lot of people talk about X's and O's. And for me, like Vegas, the islands, wherever you're talking about point spreads, the lines being made, all of that's baked into that point total. Like when we talk about, you're always trying to gain an edge. And to me, the biggest edge to be had is following the money. So I'm not a guy that's going to see an opening line and pound it right away. I mean, I do have those feels from time to time, but I wouldn't claim for that to be my forte. Like I want the money to be out there. I want the line to set. I want to see which direction it's going in. And one of my most favorite things that I look for is seeing a line come out, learning where the public money's going, and seeing that that reverse line movement. Meaning, like for example, if I took Florida State, Michigan this weekend, and I'm just giving examples because this isn't what's happening with that game, and everybody's betting Michigan -3, but yet the line goes to 2.5.
Yeah.
To me, that's something that stands out, that there's sharper money coming in, moving the line the other way, or maybe there's something else that I'm missing. So I tend to follow that. And then if I see that, I'll usually go the opposite way. And then the other thing that I tend to do as well is looking at underdogs when the point spread's close and betting them on the money line. Like I know some people like to get a little extravagant, like, oh, I like this 8-point underdog to win outright. And it's great when you hit, but chasing that all the time, those losses can accumulate when you're trying to find it. But, sometimes you do have that feel, and March Madness is the perfect time to do that. But that's probably the thing I look for most, because I'll always look at the slate. And the other thing that's big to me is I won't bet. If I'm seeing public money come in at 58 to 60% or even higher on a team, I will never bet on a team that has that much money on the public side. I'll fade the game. That's just my philosophy. It doesn't mean it's correct. It doesn't mean that team's going to cover or not cover, whatever. But I'm just not going to go with the public on a big play like that, as far as all that money coming in. As I tell people all the time, there's a reason why they're building skyscrapers or, roller coasters on top of skyscrapers in Vegas, because the house is always going to win. And it's not like I can bet every game with the house, but I can try to pick my spots and be as smart as I can by doing that.
We have a variation of that exact saying is marble is not cheap, and there is a lot of it in Vegas.
Yeah.
Same principle. We harp on that all the time, is that there's such a difference between number of tickets and cash, and and that sort of thing. And I think you really just hit on something key here that I think a lot of people, we look at sports specifically as very different types of bets, or even within sports, college football versus the NFL. And if your point about value on a close underdog is really important, because specifically in the NFL, it's any given Sunday. And if you think that there's that underdog that has like even a fighting chance, and the line should dictate that, you pick up that extra value in that bet. And it's just definitely, we view that as something very, very interesting to keep an eye on because of that.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of things to look at it. And the thing that I try to teach people all the time, or at least tell them, your process can be 100% correct and the outcome can be the exact opposite. And, where we were just talking about the game with the Ravens and the Browns, like you could have been on the Browns side of things and felt like you were golden the entire game. And then you see what happens. It just, that happens all the time. And I was trying to tell people the first round of March Madness, I was all over Utah State against Texas Tech. Loved them. I know the Sharp players were on it as well. And Utah State was winning for a good portion of time. You get into the second half, and then I think Texas Tech went on like a 12-0 run and never looked back. Utah State struggled to score. Yep. Their big man, they weren't getting them enough touches, and they fell in love with the 3-ball, whatever. Basketball is such a funny game where, depending on how much somebody wants to foul at the end of the game, it can change everything. And I had a game where a team was down 10, and I'm giving what was I giving? I think I was giving 8.5. And they're down 10 and the other team's fouling. And I'm like, you guys are out of the game. And sure enough, you know what happened? Missed free throw. They hit a 3. And now I'm looking at it going, I can't believe I lost that game. I covered from start to almost finish, and you lose. And somebody's like, nice pick, jackass. And it's like, well, the process can be right and you can still have poor outcomes. Yeah. There's a variance to it.
Yep. And to add to that, there's very few things more entertaining specifically at a basketball game when the game's out of reach and there's a select group of people usually in the upper deck on those types of free throws just going bananas because they either have the over or they have the underdog.
I love those people, man. Yeah, those are my people, so I love them. It's great.
They are the best. They make that end of the game so entertaining. And that's one of the things I miss about that live interaction in games. It's just there are certain things you get at games that you just can't get on a TV screen. And so you touched on it earlier, and we talked to a lot of people who are very mixed on this. Like some people say, I want to see lines as soon as they come out and pick them off. Other people say that line movement is an information point for me. And so I want to wait and get as much information as possible. It sounds like you lean more towards letting that line play out and seeing the movement as opposed to picking something off early. Is that accurate? Or are you kind of?
I'd say more times than not. Yeah, that's as close to as accurate as you can be. There are times where I'll see a line. I talk about this now, and clearly it happens working on a morning show where I come in and there's not as much movement on the lines as I want to see or the money coming in because it's real early and the line's just set overnight. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you'll get it a day before. But for the most part, there will be times I get up in the morning and I'm like, from watching a game the night before, I'm like, man, James Harden's questionable. There's a chance he might not play. That line's going to move 3 or 4 points. I want to jump on it now. That actually happened the other night with the Nets facing the Jazz when they were 10-point favorites. And I'm going, I don't think Harden's playing tonight. So I want to hammer the Jazz here as far as, how things are setting up, because if they don't have Irving, Harden, or KD, that's a vastly different team with the talent levels, especially playing, right now, who's the number 1 seed out West. But yeah, a lot of that applies to me. And I'd say more so I'd rather wait and see the line move, have it kind of set, and then develop my opinion, even if that in the long run costs me a half a point or a point here or there. Usually, as I said, being a contrarian, more times than not, I'm going to be with Vegas. So the line movement's going to favor me. It's just picking the right spots. And I tell people this all the time. When I first started betting, and I'd bet the damn board. Like, you know how good you have to be if you're going to bet 20 games, the side and the total. Like, you have to be absurdly good and incredibly lucky, because eventually you're paying any of your winnings back in vig or juice over the long haul. And if you're betting like baseball doing that, and you're betting the heavy favorites, you miss 1 or 2 of them, your day is ruined. Yep. So that's the hard part. So my process is normally to write down all the games I like, and then I go in reverse and start crossing off my least favorites compared to it. And then I'll circle the ones I like the most, and those will become my favorite plays of the day. And then other leans, if you will, because I know there are action junkies like myself, because I'm still the same way. Like, I want to bet all those games, but it's not the case. You can't do it to be successful at this.
Yep. Yeah, there has to be a separation from head and heart. And I think a lot of people have a very similar approach to what you're saying. Maybe not a lot of people, but a lot of people do it that way, where very similar to a photo negative being as important as a photo. Like, I know what doesn't work. And so by crossing those out, I know I kind of start to define what works and what my process is when I'm looking at games. So I think that's a great way to do it.
And another thing to that, and just talking about it, because the guys that have their own systems, they have their algorithms, they set everything up and they know what the line should be. And when they see that differential, whether it's off 2 points or maybe a money line favorite should be 170 and they're looking at it and it's 140, it's like, well, I'm going to hammer that line, or vice versa, an underdog. The guys that have their systems in place, it's not like they're giving especially if they're a handicapper and they're selling their picks, it's not like they're getting their picks out to you right away so you can hammer that line. Right. Because a lot of time by the point in time they get it out to you, the line's already moved. Yep. And the problem I have with it is, and you see it every weekend or every day with guys that are selling their picks, you'll look at it and go, how the hell does he have them plus 3.5? They've been 2.5 all week. And then he'll claim that he had it at the beginning of the week. But that does no good to the people that are paying you for the picks, because if they want that price, or if they want that spread, they have to now buy a half a point. And then if they lose, they're losing even more. And it's part of this is what I hate about this industry is there's just so many people taking advantage of other people. as far as selling their picks. And, we've all talked about the scam decappers, tell the left coast to take Oakland and tell the East Coast over here, go ahead and take the Ravens. And either way, 50% of the time they're going to be right, depending on their clientele. And that happens way more than people want to realize it. So that's what I hate about this industry. But, my whole goal was always to teach people, make up your own mind, come up with your own picks, see the value and try to find, push yourself a little bit, try to find a reason why you would bet on an underdog in a certain situation. Cause the times that I've run into people and talked to them, they always want to bet the favorites. And granted, they're the better team. That's why they're favored. But it's the hard part of this industry.
I totally agree. That's actually how our company was founded. So we were driving home from the beach, one of the co-founders and I, and in between sports radio segments, on comes Jimmy Big Bags, and he's never lost against the spread, right? And so if you call now and give your credit card, you're guaranteed to make money. And we were like, why is no one holding this guy account? Like, you couldn't do this in any other industry.
So I did this once. We had one of these, and the guys, they pay to be on the air. So it's not like they're essentially a sponsor. Like, I can't badmouth them on the air, but the one guy pissed me off so much because he's like, look, I got inside information. And I'm like, well, first off, you're a liar. You don't have inside information. You're not talking to the GM of the Mets or, or the Cleveland Browns. You do not have inside information. My entire life doing this, I got 3 tips on games that were fixed. 2 of them, I would venture to say, were right, that somebody had an in on it. This is over 20 years worth it. So this guy gets it every week.
Yeah.
He's in, and he knows who on the side and the total of every Monday night football game. Are you freaking kidding me? So we had a guy come on the air, and this is how clueless he was. Came on my show on a Friday, gave out his picks, and I told him I was on the opposite side. And he said, well, when you have me on next week, we'll see who's right. So I ended up being right.
Yeah.
Could have gone either way. I ended up being right on the pick. He comes on Friday and he goes, I told you Kansas City was going to win. And I'm like, no, you didn't. He goes, I absolutely did. And I said, play it back. We ran it back and played the sound clip of him telling me the other team was going to win. So he must have forgot which radio station he told this pick. He's just a crappy salesman that'll convince people to buy these picks, and he has no idea what he's doing. And I've talked to people that work for companies here locally that sell picks that are like, oh, if you go online, you can find free picks everywhere and just sell them to your clients. You just have to be good at selling picks. And I'm going, you know what? That's such a shady way to do business.
Oh.
There are people making money hand over fist, taking advantage of other people. It's almost like having televangelists in our industry. Send us your seed and we'll make sure you go to heaven. And these guys are just liars, man. There's so many of them. It drives me nuts.
That's why we exist. That's literally why we exist. So next time he comes on, you could bring in your special guest, SharpRank, and we could validate and audit what he's doing. So.
Next time he comes on, it'll be under a different name, and I'll have to figure out his voice. These guys change their names every year.
Yeah, so. Well, they have to, because it's diminishing returns. 50%, 50%. This one's right. 50%, 50%. Like, eventually there's only one person left who's like gone the distance with you.
And it's absurd. And just from a radio standpoint, I've seen this happen where these guys come in to buy time, and all they want to do is hit the market in September, get as much of a clientele as they can, then pull their advertising. So we have them set up to come on for 15 weeks. They usually bail about 7 weeks in, but we keep taking their money over and over again because it's part of the beast. It's the industry. Like they're an advertiser. And it's not like we're going to have a restaurant on and I'm going to go, don't go eat there because their food sucks. I can't do that. It's one of the things that drives me the most nuts in my industry of, just talking about sports talk radio. A guy buys time, got to let him go, got to let him do his thing. And, we had a couple guys that come on, and the guys that scream over and over again, I got inside information. I was the first to this story. I did that. And I'm like, who are you talking to? Like, you don't have that information, but it's incredibly frustrating.
All right. Well, this is nice to know that we are aligned on that. So if you, I know you play some totals as well. Do you have a preference there as far as sides? Because we look at them as like very different skill sets as far as picking totals or picking sides. Do you have a way that you like to figure that out?
Yeah. So, Yeah, I do like betting totals a lot, especially when you're looking at games and sometimes you don't find value in that. Looking at pace of play, I'm not big on historical data like going back 5 years because I don't think that has anything to do with this season. But I'll look at the money and fade it. A lot of times it's funny this year because I don't know anything about hockey. I'll be the first one to tell you. Like, I understand it. I talk sports for a living. Nobody talks about the Caps in this city until the Caps are doing well.
Yeah.
And then they jump aboard in the playoffs and then all of a sudden everybody's rocking the red. But it just kind of shows you that I don't need to know X's and O's or whatever, all the players' names to be able to look at money and see the things that I find most important. Like, it's nice to sit down and break down a game and say, oh, this team's great against the run. Or if I want to give you the PFF look and say, this is the best wide receiver cornerback matchup, might be great for daily fantasy stuff. But as far as a gambling standpoint, because there's one matchup in a game that you can take advantage of, doesn't mean the team won't alter, double team a receiver, whatever. I'm just trying to give some sort of view here. But when it comes to the totals and with hockey, that's where I've been. So when it's a really low total and everybody's pounding the under, like, oh, these teams can't score, they suck. More times than not, I'm probably going to be on the over there. And then I see the 6.5 totals and I'm like, man, 7 goals is a lot. I'm on it. I'm like, and I've actually done extremely well in hockey. And just to piggyback off of that, like in daily fantasy sports, my first big hit was on golf. I won 136,000 on DraftKings on golf. And I only knew one of the players in my lineup, and that was Bryson DeChambeau, just because he'd been in the news forever. All the other guys, I'm like, I have no idea who these guys are. But all I did was use the information. I used the analytics and looked at the data, and it became player A, player C, player, F, whatever. And then I matched them up for course history and how they play on certain surfaces, what their strengths are. And then I fit them into a salary cap format, and it's benefited me more. That was my first huge hit. And it was on a sport that I don't really know all that well. Now I do because I've been playing it all the time.
Yeah. And so do you see yourself as having, we use the term information edge, I guess, and I guess it's kind of industry standard, but is that where you see yourself having an information edge? Is that you're doing another level of, like in daily fantasy, for example, you're competing against the general public. And so for a lot of people, that's entertainment value. And if you are taking another look at analytics and data, you're giving yourself an edge over the field. Or do you look at it as a sport specific? I know you love basketball. Do you have any sort of preference on information edge? Like where do you see the most success or value for yourself?
So I'll tell you something that I found last year that I've been using, because it doesn't matter what sport. I mean, basketball is my favorite. Football, you have so much time for the line to really set itself. And there's more that comes in on a weekly basis than on a daily basis. Guys that have systems can really have some success, especially in college basketball. That's been one of the most profitable sports because there's so many games and Vegas can't always be right on the line. So they're going to hammer where they find edges. But the one thing that I found was in baseball. So, and this is from a daily fantasy standpoint, and I'll give them a little love here, rotogrinders.com, which you can, sign up for a monthly pass, depending on what you want. But for baseball, they have this thing called the Weather Edge app. And the Weather Edge app does analytical and statistical data from histories of games played in the same temperature, same situations, and tries to give you an edge. Well, where I use it as far as me being a contrarian and looking at games that I like. So what I'll do is I'll write down all the games in baseball where I like the totals, be it under or over. And starting pitcher, all that stuff doesn't matter. It does. Don't get me wrong. That's one of the most important things as far as betting on baseball. But again, especially early in the year where guys are only going to go 5 innings or you're finding an edge here, you don't know when a pitcher is going to have a bad day. Max Scherzer has a great game, but he gives up 3 solo taters. And now all of a sudden, in a spread that's 6.5, you're feeling pretty good about where you are. So I'll use that data of what they have on the Weather Edge, because they'll tell you like, hey, this is off the charts for the over. It's a great game for hitters, great game for pitchers. And if I'm on the under and I see they're on the same side, that's the game I'm going to hammer. And I had so much success using their data. And there's other things that people don't look at. Umpire data. You can get that stuff readily available to find out who has a tighter strike zone. Is that going to help a pitcher that has better control, hurt one that doesn't? There's all kinds of things that go into it. And everybody knows you got to check the weather with Major League Baseball, because I was telling the guys when I first got in the DFS industry, hit me up. I'll tell you when it's humid as hell in Baltimore. We're going to have one of those 12-9 games and I'm telling you, I'm pretty damn good at picking those games out from being here and seeing it on a consistent basis. But the humidity is huge. People always want to look at wind, which is a huge factor. Yep. Wrigley's the perfect example because you'll have games where the total's 6 with 2 crappy pitchers. You're like, what the hell's going on? Wind's blowing in. Or you'll have a game where the wind's blowing out and you would have like Darvish versus Clayton Kershaw. And you're like, how the hell is the total 11.5? Well, because a fly ball turns into a home run just like that. So that's been very profitable for me as far as using that edge. But that Weather Edge app, I'm telling you, man, it's a game changer for me because I'm using what I like and what they like. And when I combine them, the success rate I had on totals was incredible.
That's awesome. That's really cool. They have some really nice content over there, and data and insights and that type of stuff. We have an idea for this fall for a weather aspect to what we do. It's a little more entertainment value, but it'll be pretty funny. I think it'll be informative but funny.
But it's like, where can you get an edge? Where can you find something that helps you? And for years when I first got into gambling, I would always read like coming up for college football, it was Phil Steele's book. Couldn't wait to get it. I'd find all the trends. When this team does this, they're 14-2-1 against the spread. And it was nice early on, like looking at some of that stuff and seeing the matchups, and they do a phenomenal job. It really gives you some insight on the teams and how they look. But more importantly than all that, these trends of for players that aren't even on this team anymore and haven't been on the team for 10 years, it has nothing to do with what's going on today. So then I started to realize that I can use trends any way I want. Like I can find a trend to fit my narrative if I want to bet a side of a game, or, I could honestly look at the data, take the information and make up my own mind on how things are going. It doesn't have to be something as far as, well, because this team's 11-0-1 as a favorite in November, I got to take them. Yep. That to me, that's silly. Now, if you wanted to get to like Tampa Bay when they struggled, when the weather was below freezing, anytime they left, like there's some validity to that of, taking a warm weather team, but eventually that's going to run out. They're going to win a game. And they did. They went on and won the Super Bowl. So when they beat Philly in sub freezing temperatures. So,
yep.
It's just a lot of information. It's using it the right way because I can build, again, a narrative for whatever I want to sell you as far as why this team will win or why that team will win.
Yep. I totally agree. And we say all the time, the devil's in the detail with statistics. I mean, I can tell you exactly what you're saying. I can create an argument on both sides of the spread based on which way I want to pick. And so what we've started to coin as a term is called an educated gut. So it's it's a combination of like how I feel, like what I know, and then what the statistics say, and which, there's an analytical piece as well as that. Just I know this, I've seen it, I know it. All right. So in our office, we have a list of fun gambling rules that have stemmed mostly from very bad beats or something like that. Always, when a live mascot passes away, you bet that team the next. Just like fun stuff like that. Do you have any sort of fun rule for gambling? Just for I don't know. It could come from a bad beat. Could just come from whatever.
Well, there's actually 2 that I have. So I love betting on teams that are in the top 25 in college football or college basketball. They go on the road and they're an underdog. So against an unranked team. So I always love, like, God, how many times did it hit this year and this year's different without fans being in the venues, but it still was working because it tells you a lot about that point spread. Like you'd look at it and Oklahoma would be the 18th ranked team. And before Oak State got ranked, they're like, man, they're headed to Oklahoma State and they're not ranked. And Oklahoma State's a 2.5 point favorite. It doesn't, like, why? This is a top 25 team. But again, and that's what like the public sees. So they're just going to hammer Oklahoma because they're the top 25 team. And how are they an underdog? They should win when more times than not, the underdog wins. The other thing that, and I don't have any statistical evidence to sit here and throw at you, but just from in years past, teams on Monday Night Football that go on the road the following week, the short week, back-to-back road games, usually if they're on the road on Monday night and go on the road, great. Even if they're not, I always love betting against them because it's a tougher week to prepare. And I feel like depending on, especially if they won on Monday night and then they go on the road the next week, it's a huge opportunity for that letdown effect. I don't know how much like that stuff plays into it with you guys. And when you're looking at analytical data, like there's always people that talk about revenge games and this and that. And sometimes I think there's some validity to it, but more times than not, like somebody was talking about, Kawhi Leonard playing the Spurs this week. It's a revenge game. I said, he hasn't gotten over that crap yet. He's been out. He won a championship when he left, and he went to another team after he left that team. So does he really harbor that much ill will? And he had so much that he ended up sitting last night. So it didn't matter, but those things, those are two things that I clearly look for when I bet college basketball or football or the NFL on Monday Night Football.
Cool. Awesome. That's great. All right. You ready to rock through a lightning round and we'll wrap this bad boy up?
Sure.
All right, cool. Just 10 or so questions, 1-word answers. First thing that comes to mind. We spent hours creating the name for this segment, lightning round. So it's very, very proprietary. All right. Favorite sports movie?
Favorite sports movie. I just had an argument with somebody about this. I like A League of Their Own. I think that's the best sports movie. And it's about women playing baseball, which two things never went together for me, but I do. And I also like, on a side note, and I know this is supposed to be 1-word answers, I always like the movie Cinderella Man, even though there's some historical inaccuracies in the movie, but that was another one I enjoyed.
Cool. Least favorite head coach?
Least favorite head coach. Well, that's going to be between Pete Carroll. I can't stand him and chewing gum, looking like Ellen DeGeneres out there in Seattle. He's in that group. Who else really bothers me? Well, from a DFS standpoint, there's quite a few guys because Greg Popovich, who I love as a coach, but from a daily fan, like he'll play some random dude 28 minutes and you don't even realize it. But I would go Pete Carroll. He bothers me.
Give me one must listen to album.
Oh, a must listen to album. So I'll give you a new one. My favorite new album that I listen to is a band called Need to Breathe. It's their live album, Volume 1. They came up as kind of like they were labeled Christian rock, but they're more Southern rock, even though they have some influences as both their parents were in the church. But their live album is one of my favorite albums of all time. I could honestly put it on repeat, go out for an 8-hour drive and not turn it off. I enjoy it that much.
Cool. Personal best game day experience to date?
Best game day experience to date for me would have been, so we did a guys trip where we watched Michigan play Purdue. So I got to go to the Big House and tailgated. I got so drunk and I ate an extremely burnt hot dog. So I woke up burping up whiskey and charcoal. It was, but it was still a fun time. We were with the guys and just busting each other's chops. And then immediately after that game ended, we had a good time. Went out to a nice meal, got up extremely early, and then went and watched the Ravens play the Bengals down in Cincinnati. So It was kind of like a cool weekend trip. By the way, Michigan for the first time since like 1947 lost in the Big House to Purdue, and then the Ravens lost to the Bengals. So it was a great trip from being with the guys. But other than that,
I do with my family. We do an away trip for a game every year to go check out a new stadium or something like that, and it's a lot of fun. And then I got to go to the Big House 2 years ago, and it was pretty. If you like college football, it's a pretty cool experience.
And I'm not knocking Maryland. I've been to their games, but it was just a different feel at a stadium like that with a city that's or a town that I guess you could say that's big on college football, where, I mean, if the Terps are really good, people show out. And I'm not saying there aren't Terps fans, but it was just a totally different feel from tailgating, sneaking in flask and drinking on those bleachers that were hot as hell that day. Probably why I passed out so quick. But boot and rally.
Yeah, that's not a taste that'll wash out of your mouth quickly.
That hot dog was so burnt.
And whiskey. Oh. All right. Would you rather have this is going to be a loaded gun. Would you rather have Lamar Jackson's athleticism or Patrick Mahomes' sheer arm talent if you could only pick one?
Oh, I would say Lamar Jackson's athleticism, because I think there's so much more you can build off or, try to get better in other areas. Like I've never seen anybody like him. And I'm one of the guys too here in Baltimore. I don't mind saying it. I didn't want the Ravens to draft him. Like I thought there were other avenues they could have taken to better their team. And to a degree, I was right in the direction I thought they were going to go in with some of the picks that were there and how good those guys became. But I was so dead wrong on Lamar and his drive. And, people criticize him for his ability to throw, but he's getting better in that department. He's so freaking good. And he's such a likable guy the more and more you cover him. Yeah. I'd go that route. But Pat Mahomes, that seems like a generational talent. So there's not a wrong answer there, really.
There is not. One franchise you most want to see win a championship in any sport?
It's the Baltimore Orioles. So
Gosh.
I'm an Oriole fan. That's the one team that I grew up with. I didn't grow up a Baltimore Colts fan. They left town when I was 4 years old. People here in the city know my fandom, my love for Peyton Manning, and I got to see the Colts win a championship. And I don't have ties to that team. I kind of root for the Ravens now because I know it's good for my city and, covering the team. It just feels weird not rooting for a Baltimore team. And I'm a Mavericks fan, but I got to see them win a championship with Dirk. And now I love the fact that I get to root for Luka week in and week out. But make no mistake about it, I would trade every one of those championships for all those other teams and not have them win another one just to see the Orioles win one in my lifetime.
Man, I love hearing that. Best crabs in town.
I'm going Costas in. I mean, if I said anything else, they should shoot me. But I mean it. Their food is just amazing. They're great people. Crab cakes, crabs, you can't beat it. There's a lot, and let me just say this, because I'm friends with a lot of guys in restaurants in the area. There's a ton of places you can go to get good steamed crabs or just good food in general. So we're fortunate to be here. I remember being down in Louisiana. We were talking about the Super Bowl that the Ravens were in beforehand, and went out to a bunch of restaurants where people are like, oh, you got to go here and try this. And I go there and I'm going, man, this can't hold a candle to any of the stuff I was eating back home. But some really good spots in New Orleans, don't get me wrong. But yeah, that's where I would go Costas in.
Loudest stadium you've ever, or arena?
Loudest venue I've been to. Because I haven't gone to a lot of opposing stadiums. Like I went to Wrigley Field. Baseball's different though when we're talking about loud. I haven't seen a ton of basketball games and venues. Football, I've went to a couple of different stadiums. I mean, I know the loudest stadiums I see on TV as far as Seattle and Kansas City and what they've been. But I would go back to, like, even though I said baseball, Memorial Stadium was incredibly loud the few times I got to go as a kid. Maybe I would go with that one. But then that's kind of a hard question for me to answer just because I haven't been to a ton of stadiums. I've been to Tennessee, Cincinnati. I've been to the new stadium in New York for the Giants and Jets. And that was at a Super Bowl, and that's kind of like a little bit more laid back. I got to watch Peyton Manning lose 43-8, so it sucked.
All right, last one. If you weren't creating content for the fan, what would you be doing?
I'd probably be like, I just got offered a job to coach basketball. I'd probably be coaching basketball. Like I just love the sport. I love teaching it, the fundamentals, how important it is for kids to be good with both hands. And I guess that applies to soccer too, with both feet, and, just being able to adjust and understand the game. So like the game's changed so much that the way I used to work with my big men is I would have them work with post-up moves. And then I had to adjust saying, man, this is unfair to them because what happens if this kid grows and he's got a guard's body, but he's tall. And so now I have them working with all the ball handling, dribbling drills, and I have everybody doing post-up moves and just learning the whole game. So I think I'm going to take the high school gig that I got offered now that I'm on the morning show, but I'd be doing something like that or just involved with charity work because I love doing working with some of the nonprofits, the funds that we've raised in Mo Gaba's name. And ultimately, to me, that's important.
Cool. Coach Conn has a nice ring to it, man. That sounds like something you would see on a DVD cover. Okay, throw out your Twitter handles, or where can people find your stuff?
Yeah, so I'm at Jeremy Conn 1057. So it's CONN. And you can catch me on Facebook too, even though like you can follow me on there. I'm on pressboxonline.com just to let people know, like, I love keeping my picks free. I still get crap from people when I'm wrong. Oh, nice picks, loser. You get it all the time. I guess you grow accustomed to it. But I signed on with pressboxonline.com so I could keep my picks for free. I was talking to a couple different companies, and ultimately I got the least amount of money from Pressbox to give them my picks and write content for them. But they allowed me to keep it for free where people didn't have to pay for it. And ultimately, that's what I like. I like teaching people how to do this stuff and learn it on their own so they can make up their own decisions. But those are the two places to find me. Again, pressboxonline.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at JeremyConn1057.
Awesome. Well, Jeremy, this was great, man. Really appreciate you stopping in, and a huge, big fan of you and your content and just you as a person. So thanks so much for stopping by. It's really appreciated.
Appreciate it, man. Anytime you need me, give me a shout.
All right.
These interviews are available on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and if you're feeling professional, LinkedIn. We'll see you around.